Confirmation hearings are underway for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. She is the first black woman to be nominated for the Supreme Court. Monday's opening statements are the first part of a week of hearings ahead of the Senate vote.
CBS News congressional correspondent Nikole Killion joins us now with more. Nikole, good afternoon to you. What kind of experience does Judge Jackson bring to the table, and what do you think will come up in this first round of questioning after the opening statements are at last completed?
Well, I think in terms of her experience, it's certainly quite varied. As you know, she is a Harvard University graduate, Harvard Law School graduate. She has been a public defender. She has been on the U.S. Sentencing Commission. She has been on the district court. She's now on the Circuit Court of Appeals here in Washington. So it's really a quite varied experience. And one thing that's interesting to note in terms of her being a former public defender is that if she is confirmed, she would actually be the first public defender to serve on the high court. Many think that that could provide her with a different perspective than some of the current justices. But, that being said, in terms of the questioning, we really don't expect that to get underway in earnest until tomorrow. There will be 2 days of questions and answers from senators, again starting Tuesday, and then again on Wednesday. That first round of questioning, senators will have about 30 minutes each to ask Judge Jackson a range of questions. And through the opening statements that we've heard today, we've already gotten a sense of what senators want to know from the judge, whether that is more about her judicial philosophy, whether that is more about the issue of court packing. That is something many Republicans have brought up in their opening statements. They want to know if that is something that she supports, given that they say some of the groups that have supported Judge Jackson are proponents of that. Many senators are expecting it to press her on other issues, whether that is the current types of cases that are before the Supreme Court. We know they're taking up reproductive rights and the issues of climate change and the environment. And certainly while the judge may not be able to preview what kinds of decisions she might make, those are certainly issues that could potentially be raised. We also heard a lot from senators talking about the issue, again, of these various groups. Many Republicans say these are dark money groups that they believe are backing Judge Jackson. And so some Republicans have indicated they want to know more about these groups and whether or not the judge is aligned in her thinking with some of these groups. So that's just a preview, if you will, of potentially what's to come in the days ahead.
And of course, Nikole, no Supreme Court nominee can totally escape the politics that swirl around their nomination. So as you know, some Republicans have indicated Judge Jackson's nomination could be used against Democrats. How could her nomination or even potential confirmation impact midterm elections?
Well, I think potentially in a couple of ways. I mean, getting back to this issue and argument over dark money, I think perhaps the most interesting opening statement thus far came from Senator Lindsey Graham, who basically accused some of these outside groups of buying a Judge Jackson seat, in essence saying, this is why you're here, because all of these groups kind of poured money into backing you. And so I think from that standpoint, those who may support that type of argument certainly could, potentially see that as a detriment in terms of Democrats and their views in terms of backing the judge, because many argue that this has really kind of fundamentally changed the process. And we've kind of heard the counter argument from Democrats saying, well, look, on the right, you guys have these dark money groups, too, and you guys have propped up candidates, too. So, we really are hearing a lot about the process and how it may not be working as well as it should. So that potentially could be an issue that hurts maybe both parties going forward, unless the process can be rectified, which some senators talked about. But, some would argue that her nomination certainly could potentially boost Democrats' prospects, particularly among voters of color, particularly black voters. We've heard President Biden at the time when he was elected back in November of 2020 saying that he has the
Right.
back of African Americans, and, where he may not have been able to make strides on issues like voting rights, police reform, and the like, this is an area where he has been able to deliver. And so for that reason, it could potentially boost Democrats' prospects as well.
That's right. For those voters who are looking to see if he made good on that particular promise. Nikole Killion on Capitol Hill, thank you so much for joining us.
You bet.